Hello guys, today we're going to discuss the topic of relative clauses. Clauses beginning with question words, for example who, which, where, are often used to modify nouns and some pronouns. That is, this is to identify people and things, or to give more information about them. Clauses used like this are called relative clauses. For example, those who work at CNBV are honorable individuals. Victor, who is wearing a dark suit, is my friend. 1978 is the year when I was born. San Angel is an area where you find a lot of traffic. Mr. Bear is a language professor whose classes are oriented to catering to his students' needs. The reason why some students are so tired is that they have to experience a long commute every day. Now let's talk about defining relative clauses. There are two types of relative clauses. The first one is used to identify or define people or things. This clause is essential to our understanding of the elements we're discussing. For example, in the sentence, the lady who arrived late is my friend. The relative clause who arrived late is fundamental for us to distinguish who this lady is. The original clause will read, the lady is my friend. And while this idea is certainly grammatically correct, it makes no sense because without the clause who arrived late, it is not possible to discern the woman being discussed from any other woman. Now let's go to non-defining relative clauses. This is the other type of relative clause. Unlike the first one, this clause is not used to identify or define people or things, but to simply provide additional information about the element being discussed. We place this type of clause in the sentence association with commas. An example, Mariana, who arrived late, is my friend. In this case, the relative clause who arrived late is not necessary for us to distinguish who Mariana is. The original clause will read, Mariana is my friend, which is grammatically correct and it makes sense on its own. The relative clause is only adding extra information which is expendable should we decide not to include it. Now, in terms of whether the pronoun works as a subject, object, or possessive, relative clauses use relative pronouns which function as the connector to a thing or a person present in the first clause. As you may notice, that is not used in non-defining relative clauses. For example, we have the defining relative clause for people, subject, in that case will be who or that. For the object, it will also be who or that. And for the possessive, it will be whose. For defining relative clause, things, which or that is a situation for subject, for the object is which or that as well, and for the possessive is whose. For non-defining relative clauses, in this case for people, the subject is represented by who, the object is also represented by who, and possessive whose as well. Non-defining relative clauses for things, in this case for the subject is which, for the object is which, and for the possessive is whose. In the sense of these three functions being used, as you may imagine, each one of these three functions has very specific applications. For example, as a subject, as the name clearly indicates, the relative pronoun functions as the subject of the relative clause. For example, CNBV is a novel institution which oversees the financial system in Mexico. Its employees are masters of the financial universe. CNBV, which is a novel institution, oversees the financial system in Mexico. Its employees are masters of the financial universe. Breakfast is a meal which is necessary to be healthy. Money is something which allows us to purchase products and services. Now, in the sense of the relative pronoun being an object, as the name clearly indicates, in this case the relative pronoun functions as the object of the relative clause. In defining relative clauses it may be omitted, though this could be considered informal. For example, CNBV is a novel institution which we work for. CNBV, which we consider to be novel, oversees the financial system in Mexico. Its employees are masters of the financial universe. Breakfast is a meal which we all need to be healthy. Money is something which we use to purchase products and services. In all these examples, the subject of the clause is the pronoun we, while the relative pronouns represent the object of their clauses. Now let's discuss the possessive. Finally, this is the case in which the relative pronoun represents an idea of possession for the subject or of the original clause. The pronoun whose is the one we use for such a function. For example, CMBB is a noble institution whose employees are masters of the financial universe. Mr. Bear, whose classes are oriented to catering to his students' needs, lives in Tasqueña. San Angel is an area whose traffic is impossible to avoid at 8 o'clock. And the new revolving door law, whose scope is yet to be determined, must be enacted in the month of September. Now let's discuss relative adverbs. In a similar way as with the previous examples of relative pronouns, relative adverbs allow you to express an idea in connection with the subject of the first clause in the sentence. The difference is that they highlight ideas of place, where, time, when, and reason, why. For example, 1978 is the year when I was born. September is the month when Mexico celebrates the most. 8 o'clock is a time when most students arrive to class. San Angel is an area where traffic is awful. Home is a place where you can always relax. Finally, a dashboard is a part of the car where you find lots of information. In terms of reason, the reason why no one arrives at 8 o'clock is completely unknown to me. Now, in terms of an additional point, relative adverbs, the examples which I explained in the previous slide are more common for conversational than for written expression. The latter tends to be considered more formal. Formality in itself cannot be expressed by simply using the pronoun which in association with a preposition, but instead by placing such preposition before the pronoun. For example, 1978 is the year in which I was born. September the 15th is a date on which Mexico celebrates its independence. Monday is a day on which it is harder to start our day. 8 o'clock is a time at which most students arrive to class. San Angel is an area in which traffic is awful. Home is a place at which you can always relax. A dashboard is a part of the car on which you find lots of information. The reason for which no one arrives at 8 o'clock is completely unknown to me. Finally, one last comment regarding relative clauses. One very common way to use non-defined relative clauses is the one in which we place the relative clause at the end of the sentence and the comma which precedes it has a special implication. For example, the savings I have in my Afore are not considerable, which depresses me. In this case, it is the entire concept of not having a lot of money saved in my Afore which depresses me. Another example, Adrian told me he is married, which I find difficult to believe because he does not wear a wedding ring. The pronoun the pronoun which does not relate to the ring itself, but to the fact that Adrian does not wear it. Thank you very much, guys.